A customer asked for a refund for something I hadn't sold yet. I was stacking the top shelf of the energy drink aisle, my sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum, when the words reached me. They didn't sound right, even in context. I turned slowly, almost expecting someone else to be behind the voice, but there was only him. A man leaning against the counter, his coat wet from the rain outside, water dripping in small, silent arcs onto the floor. Sir," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, though a shiver ran down my spine. "I think you might be mistaken. I haven't rung anything up for you yet." He smiled, slow and unsettling, like he had the time to practice it in some mirrored hall I couldn't see. "I'd like a refund," he said again, "for a purchase you haven't made yet." The words seemed to echo inside my skull. I could hear the humming of the coolers more clearly now, vibrating against my ribcage. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, a lazy stutter, and in the brief darkness between pulses, I thought I saw the aisle stretch, just slightly, enough that the edges of the shelves curved, as if trying to make space for something invisible. I don't think I can do that," I said, reaching for the register. But my hands felt heavier, sluggish, as though they had sunk into something viscous beneath my skin. The man didn't move. He simply stood, hands in the pockets of his soaked coat, tilting his head like a cat observing a trapped mouse. The rain against the windows intensified. It wasn't just rain. It sounded layered, like 100 tiny hands drumming against glass. I noticed my reflection in the sliding door, warped and twitching. My face blinked out of sync with my eyes. My lips moved before I spoke. "I think you've made a mistake," I tried again. My voice sounded hollow, too distant, like it was coming from a speaker somewhere else in the store. "That's possible," he said, "but I'd prefer to settle this now." The lights dimmed further. Shadows pooled under the shelves and behind the racks of candy, curling toward the center of the store. The cooler's humming had changed pitch lower, almost imperceptibly at first, until it sounded like a voice murmuring just below the level of conscious hearing. "Return, return." I swallowed hard and forced myself to the register. "Do you have a receipt?" I asked, though the words felt meaningless, as if asking a question in a dream. He pulled a folded slip from his coat pocket. The paper was blank. I reached for it, but my fingers passed through it, the sensation like brushing against water. The slip floated there for a heartbeat, and then it fell, spinning unnaturally in slow motion before landing on the counter with a faint tap that echoed like a chime in a cathedral. Aisles began to shift. The soda aisle, which had been 15 feet away, seemed suddenly closer, yet the candy aisle behind me elongated, stretching back like it wanted to swallow the end of the store whole. I turned, but each time I looked back, the man was closer, though I had not seen him move. I tried to steady myself, gripping the counter, listening to the distorted reflections in the cooler glass. Behind the glass, my own face looked wrong, older, younger, different, but still undeniably mine. Then it smiled. It smiled before I did. "Do you remember buying it?" the man asked, tilting his head. "Buying what?" I managed, though my throat felt constricted. He gestured vaguely toward the back of the store, toward the empty aisle where the cheap instant noodles were stacked. "The thing you sold me. I want a refund. It didn't work as promised." I glanced at the shelves. Empty. The packages were all neatly aligned, but nothing had been removed. Nothing had been touched. And yet, I knew I had sold him something. I remembered taking the money, scanning an item, the beep of the register, but my memory felt like a recording played backwards. Fragmented, wrong, heavy with static. A cooler's light flickered, and for a second I could see inside. Not the rows of sodas, but a tiny room behind the glass where something or someone watched me. My reflection leaned closer to the glass, as if pressing against it from inside. I stumbled back, catching myself on the counter. I don't understand," I said, voice cracking. The man's smile widened. "You will," he said, and then, inexplicably, the lights went out completely. The humming stopped. Silence stretched across the store like a dense fog. My ears popped as if I had been underwater. And then, The emergency lights kicked on, red and weak, casting long, crawling shadows across the floor. The store seemed bigger now, taller, narrower, impossible angles pressed against my perception. I could hear my own heartbeat in the fluorescent hum, though it sounded like it was coming from outside my chest. I glanced at the counter. The register was gone. The floor where it had been was just linoleum, and on that linoleum lay a single item, a small unmarked box. It had not been there before. The man nodded toward it. "It's yours," he said. "And it always was." I didn't move. My hands twitched as the box seemed to pulse with expectation. My reflection in the red emergency lights blinked at me independently, and I realized something horrifying. Each time I looked away, it inched closer to the box. I could see myself reaching for it in the reflections before I actually did. My body obeyed on autopilot, guided by memory I didn't own. The rain against the windows slowed to a drizzle, then ceased. The man stepped back, merging with the shadows of the store until I couldn't tell where he ended and the darkness began. I lifted the box. The lid opened effortlessly, though I hadn't touched it yet. Inside was nothing, blankness, pure emptiness. And then I understood. The refund had nothing to do with money. It was a transaction with time itself. I had sold something to the man, or perhaps to myself, years before, or maybe hours, maybe centuries. The memory of it had been threaded into my consciousness like a virus. And now it demanded settlement. I tried to close the lid, tried to put it down, tried to let go, but my hands had a mind of their own. The box pulled at my fingers, and the air around me thickened, humming with anticipation. A faint, metallic smell rose, not from the store, not from me, but from somewhere behind the fabric of reality. The lights flickered again. One brief flash, and I saw the man standing inside the box. He waved, serene, patient, ancient. My own reflection grinned at me from every surface in the store, windows, coolers, the emergency lights themselves. All of them whispered a single, terrifying instruction: complete the transaction. I screamed or tried to, but the sound came out as a metallic clatter, like coins dropped into an endless void. My eyes darted to the register spot, empty but expectant. The aisles stretched impossibly long, twisting back into the darkness, and I realized I could never leave. Not until the refund was finalized. I looked down at the box again. The man inside it was patient, too patient, and in that instant, I understood the truth of the refund. It wasn't a matter of purchase or payment. It was a matter of inevitability. Some debts could not be waived. Some sales could not be canceled. I reached toward the box again, and the store exhaled. The rain pressed against the windows of the convenience store in thick, blurry sheets. Neon signs outside flickered, sputtering into darkness and then back again, casting fractured red and blue light across the damp asphalt. I was alone, stocking shelves and avoiding the puddles that had formed on the linoleum near the entrance. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed to sync with my pulse, irregular and slow. I switched on the small, battered radio behind the counter, mostly to fill the silence. Static crackled through the speakers before a voice broke through, soft but deliberate. "Good evening, residents of Ashmere Hollow. Tonight's temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit, with a light fog settling across Maple Lane. All citizens are advised to check doors and windows before the nightly curfew at 10:15 p.m. I froze. Ashmere Hollow. I had never heard of it. The voice was calm, routine, the kind of mundane information you'd hear from any small-town broadcast. Yet something in the rhythm of the words, measured, intimate, pulled at my awareness, as if the town had a memory of me I couldn't place. Static hummed under the voice, scratching at the edges of my hearing, vibrating in the chest in time with my heartbeat. I laughed nervously, assuming it was a late-night pirate station, a small-town broadcast from somewhere just off the map. But when I pulled my phone out to check, Ashmere Hollow didn't exist. No search results, no coordinates, nothing. My hands shook slightly as I placed it back on the counter. Tonight, the lamplight on the eastern bridge flickers every 7 minutes. Citizens are reminded to avoid the riverbank after dark. Reports of unusual shadows have been noted near 7 Oak Street. I felt the air chill, my breath forming a faint mist in the cold glow of the fluorescent lights. Outside, the fog that had been creeping along the parking lot thickened, curling against the glass. It didn't belong. Fog didn't gather like that in the city. And yet, it was here, synchronized with the broadcast. I reached for the door, tempted to check, and the lights flickered violently, then dimmed, leaving the store in a sickly yellow glow. I could hear it then. Faint, almost imperceptible footfalls on the wet asphalt outside. They weren't the shuffle of the storm, not the sound of cars. Something deliberate, something that stepped where no car or pedestrian should. The radio continued. Tonight's emergency alert. A missing child, approximately 6 years old, was last seen near the hollow oak at the center of town. Residents are asked to report any sightings or sounds, particularly crying, before the curfew. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat echoing the radio's static. I didn't know why I felt implicated, like my consciousness had been grafted onto this town. I turned the dial slowly, trying to find a different station, but the tuning knob only oscillated between static and Ashmere Hollow's soft, unwavering broadcast. I noticed my reflection in the glass doors, distorted, warped. The fluorescent lights flickered again, and for a fraction of a second, I saw more than my own reflection. There were figures standing just behind me, faceless, silent. When the lights steadied, they were gone. But the unease lingered, pressing against my spine. Curfew is now in effect. Citizens are reminded that failure to comply may result in involuntary reassignment to temporary shelter facilities. The riverbank remains hazardous. Avoid unnecessary exposure. My breath caught. The words were impossibly bureaucratic, impossibly calm. But beneath them there was a warning, like a cord stretched tight across reality. My pulse quickened, and the hum in the speakers seemed to match it exactly. Every static crack, every faint pop synchronized to my heartbeat, to my nervous intake of breath. The store itself felt less solid, the linoleum faintly rippling beneath my feet, like the ground had softened in response to the broadcast. I glanced out the window. The fog had thickened into a dense gray wall, punctuated by the occasional flash of neon from street signs, warped and bending as if the world itself had been smeared. Something shifted in the periphery of my vision. A shadow moving in a way that didn't conform to the angle of the streetlights, a mass that seemed to fold into itself and stretch. Tonight's weather advisory: Ashmere Hollow will experience intermittent thunder, though no clouds are visible on radar. Residents are advised to remain indoors. Report any auditory anomalies immediately. The voice, impossibly serene, now included me. The words brushed against my memory as if they had been written in my past. Auditory anomalies, report immediately. I wanted to leave, but the lights flickered again, dimming each time my thoughts drifted to the exit. The door handle shimmered in the dim light, and for a fleeting second, it appeared to be made of wet wood, gnarled and organic, rather than metal. I sat behind the counter, clutching the radio, drawn as if by gravity. Outside, the storm intensified, the fog roiling against the building. My heartbeat synchronized fully with the static. Then I noticed. The radio had begun reporting events from the very street I lived on, as if Ashmere Hollow had swallowed reality and spat it back at me through the broadcast. Residents of Ashmere Hollow, reports indicate a man of approximate height 6 feet, wearing a dark coat, observed entering a convenience store on the corner of Maple and 9th. Staff are advised to verify identification before proceeding. I shivered. That was my store, my street. My reflection in the warped glass wasn't mine anymore. My eyes widened as the broadcast added, curfew enforcement units are approaching all non-compliant locations. Failure to appear may result in indefinite temporal relocation. Temporal relocation. The words lodged themselves in my mind, twisting against reason. I looked around. The shelves seemed subtly rearranged. Products shifted positions as I blinked. The fog outside pressed against the windows in waves, moving like the tide, and in it I could see shapes, Buildings that weren't there before, rooftops rising impossibly, streets bending at angles that defied geometry. I tried to turn off the radio, but the power cord writhed in my hands, like a living thing. The static intensified, overtaking the broadcast until I could no longer distinguish words from noise, heartbeat from feedback. The fog had begun to seep under the door, curling across the linoleum. I forced myself to stand. My reflection, the warped figure in the glass, mimicked my movements with a delay, like a cruel copy playing a moment behind reality. I reached for the handle. Cold, wet, impossible. I yanked, and the door swung inward instead of outward. The store's interior had changed. Aisles lengthened, shelves twisted, and the neon sign outside now read Ashmere Hollow Convenience, in letters I didn't recognize. The broadcast returned, quieter now, intimate and knowing. Welcome, new resident. Curfew has been adjusted for your arrival. We have been expecting you. A whisper followed, no longer from the radio but from every corner, every shadow, every reflection. You shouldn't be here, but you always were. The fog swallowed the parking lot. My pulse slowed, syncing with the hum of the fluorescent lights, which now seemed to pulse in tandem with the town itself. The exit I had sought was gone, replaced by another street, lined with houses I had never seen, yet somehow remembered. Static crackled, and I understood. Ashmere Hollow was never just a town. It was a broadcast, a memory, a temporal distortion that reached into the lives of those it named. And now it had reached me. I reached for the radio one last time. My fingers passed through it like water. The voice returned, calm, intimate, inevitable. Residents are reminded. The town exists only because it is remembered. Sleep well, citizen. Curfew is eternal. The lights flickered one final time. I blinked. The convenience store was gone. Outside, rain fell on streets that didn't exist. And somewhere, faint beneath the static, I heard my own voice calling back, answering the broadcast. I'm here. The radio went silent.